Today I've got ideas for a 10-gallon aquarium. Stay tuned. I call this one the centerpiece tank. It means you've got like one fish in there that is going to draw your attention. When everyone looks at it, that's what they're going to see mostly. And then you want to build the tank around it. So I like to use like a gourami. So maybe a honey dwarf gourami or a powder blue or a dwarf neon. You can get those at PetSmart, Petco. The honey gourami is a little bit tougher to find. You might have to go to a local pet store. But you get that one fish, a lot of personality in this 10-gallon tank. And then you want to accentuate it with a schooling fish. Now, if you pick out a powder blue gourami or a dwarf flame gourami, they're both going to be, one's going to be blue, one's going to be kind of red and blue. You don't necessarily want to pair it with neon tetras, because if you pair it with neon tetras, they're going to kind of look the same, and you're not going to get that look you're going for. So maybe with a powder blue, you go with ember tetras, so you get that red tetra versus the blue fish. If you do pick a flame gourami, maybe you go with like a Rasbora het, something that's a little more orange than anything else. But you want to definitely get different colors. So you get those two things going. And then you want to go in with a bottom dweller. So you've got kind of the centerpiece fish is going to go all around. Then you've got the schooling fish, and maybe you go with 6 to 8 of those, depending on what you pick. And then down below, you're going to go with maybe a Corydora or snails. I wouldn't go with shrimp because the gouramis will kind of hunt their antennas and that kind of stuff. But you might go with a group of 4 or 5 panda cories. Maybe you go with a group of 6 to 8 pygmy cories or habrosus cories. You could also do just a snail cleanup crew, maybe Malaysian trumpet snails, maybe it's some Nerite snails, depends on what your water is going to be. For this tank, a more kind of like this neutral zone, like 7 to 7.5 would be a great one, maybe even as low as 6.8. Maybe not go with the snails down to 6.8, but in that zone would be great. If your water's coming out of the tap, this would be a great idea for you. And then it's always a good idea to add plants for fish that will not eat them. And the gourami and the schooling fish won't eat them, and it'll help consume waste for you. So that adds another level. You could go with the plastic plants, and you could have a great looking tank, but with this 10-gallon, if you really want to make it involved, start using a little bit of fertilizer, get a decent light, grow those plants, and you can use the plants to get some of that color as well. So maybe you're going to bring in some reds, or you're going to bring in some lime green plant. You get a bunch of textures too, so think about that when you're planting it as well. You don't want just all stem stuff or vertical stuff. You want some stuff that's going to stay low, maybe some browns, maybe some reds, like an emerald green and then a light green, and then maybe you get some curly leaves. All that can accentuate it. Now, obviously, if you have a red gourami, a flame gourami, maybe you go pretty light on those red plants. So you got to kind of think about it a little bit, but the centerpiece tank is great for those that want that big fish, even though they got the smaller 10-gallon aquarium. Let me know down in the comments section what you're keeping in your 10-gallon while you listen to this, so that way everyone can kind of get ideas from each other and see all the cool setups and talk about it. So let me know down in the comments, and keep listening. The nano tank. Now, this is kind of another name for the highly aquascape tank. So this usually has CO2 injection, carpeting plants, a real attention to detail when it comes to rock and wood placement and plant placement. So you've got the main aquascape, that's the feature of the tank. Like your 10-gallon is, I'm doing a ton of gardening. And then what fish accentuate that? So a lot of times that'll be celestial pearl Danios, maybe it's Brigitei rasboras, maybe it's shrimp. All these little guys that are unlikely to disturb the plants and have very low bio load, which just means you feed them only a little bit, and they only make a little bit of waste. Now, you might be using snails in there for some algae control. You might be using a mono shrimp for some algae control. You can do little Corydoras to get in between the little pockets, because these little nano fish don't like to eat off the bottom typically. So you might use Corydoras habrosus, pygmaeus. Maybe you can find them and you get hastatus, which is a rare dwarf cory. You don't want to use things that burrow, so maybe not the coolie loaches, maybe not Malaysian trumpet snails and that type of thing. You're really focusing on that CO2 and the plants, and then the fish are the decorations. It's the opposite. Usually we do the fish, and then we decorate outside of that. So it's a different mindset, And, you got to kind of be careful. If you've never done it before, it's easy to go overboard on lighting, easy to go overboard on CO2 and really get things kind of upside down. And it can be a very delicate balance because a lot of these plants are very demanding, and it can go from looks great to I left the light on over the weekend while I was at my fiance's house or whatever, and all of a sudden it just melted down. And when I say melted down, just covered in algae, got to start over. A lot of times you can run it pretty acidic water because you'll run like an ADA soil or a Fluval stratum or an Eco Complete, and that pH might be at 6.4, and then you're injecting CO2, and now it's at 6.2, and you can start killing off bacteria and that kind of stuff. But as far as fish goes, there's a wide variety. Maybe you're doing clown killies, maybe you're doing Norman lampi killies. You've got exclamation point rasboras. There's a ton of little nanofish that are really cool. And once you get your scape set up, then you'll know what fish look good, because you don't want to put fish that look just like your scape, because then you won't see them. The goal is, if you've done a nano tank correctly or an aquascape tank correctly, the fish look like they're birds. So you've got your mountains or you've got your trees that you've made, and then the birds are flying back and forth as a flock. So usually you want a schooling fish. That's how you know you've done it right. It's a hard thing to pull off, but you got to start somewhere. You got to put your first tank together and you go, oh, I learned so much. And then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And pretty soon, you're getting compliments, you're taking pictures, and everyone loves it. Maybe you're really artistic to begin with, and that happens your first try, but don't get discouraged. It's really easy to go from I keep fish to I really want to do this very specialized thing. And then also know when you're comparing yourself to pictures on the internet, know that they may be very temporary. They might be using separate lighting to light the tank. They might be using a hairdryer to get the ripple effect. They might be doing all these outside parameters. A lot of times when you see these beautiful, beautiful tanks, they've taken out all the equipment to take the picture, and they put that equipment right back in when they're not taking the picture. So know all these tips and tricks, and so that you're not comparing to the impossible. Try and compare to, oh, that's actually running all the time. This person's actually running it like I run it. And, get some buddies online and talk tips and tricks and keep trying stuff, and it'll keep you engaged. So you don't have a heater. Well, there's still a tank you can do, the unheated aquarium. I like to mix a lot of types of Danios. It's going to be a super active tank, and so if you don't like stuff darting around really fast, then this might not be the tank for you. But it is action-packed, and it can just go at room temperature, so that's the great part about it. There's a lot of Danios to choose from. You could go with like the common zebra Danio. There's longfin zebra Danios. There's the leopard Danio. There's the blue Danio, blue leopard, all the longfin varieties. Then there's a few less well-known, maybe like the celestial pearl Danio. Those are going to be really shy, so you might not see them a whole lot, and they really need a planted tank. So you want to think about that. But all of these can live basically like 67 degrees to maybe as high as 80. And a lot of people keep their homes in that range, so you wouldn't necessarily have to buy a dedicated heater. You want to keep them in groups of at least 6, and you can kind of mix and match all those Danios out of the first group, and not so much, you wouldn't want to mix them with the celestial pearl Danios. So you might get like 3 longfin leopards, you get 3 longfin blues, and then you get 3 of the zebra stripes. You got 9 fish in there. It's going crazy. They're going to be very fast to feed. You could feed them flake food. You can feed them freeze-dried. They're mostly going to inhabit that top 1/3, and so that leaves the bottom a little bit open. You don't have a huge amount of options with no heat. With no heat, you kind of have the option of shrimp and snails, but those Danios might go after the shrimp a bit, so I go with snails. You might do some colorful narite snails. Maybe you go with a mystery snail. Maybe you go with Malaysian trumpet snails that'll burrow through your gravel. And then since you've got that wide open down low, you're going to want to fill it in with either plastic plants or live plants. I'm always a fan of live plants, but maybe you don't have that green thumb yet and you're just getting started, and you can bring that on later because it is a layer of complexity. But do know that the live plants will clean your water, and it makes it a little bit easier. Plus, plants like to be cooler, so we usually keep them in that tropical temperature. They actually prefer to be a little bit cooler, and so it makes it a little bit easier. But if you can't afford a heater yet, you still have those options. And good news is that first group of Danios is very, very, very tough and hardy, widely available at almost any pet store. Celestial pearl Danios, more expensive. They're going to be like $5-6 a piece. You're going to have to go to a specialty like mom and pop store. They need like frozen food, stuff that stays in that water column. So they're a little bit more maintenance, I would say, whereas all those other Danios are going to be anywhere from like $2 to $3, maybe $3.50 for some of those long fin varieties. And it's a great tank for kids and that kind of stuff because they're very active, pretty colorful, and they can withstand kind of being new. So what I mean is that if you're new to the hobby, they can withstand like a little bit of overfeeding and, you know, learning the ropes better than some of the more exotic fish. So good luck. Do yourself a favor, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and we'll see you in the next video.